Do you like ghost stories? Better yet, do you like true ghost stories? If the answer is yes, then join me as I tell another scary story from the haunted Half Moon Inn. Together, we will travel to the frightening land of the supernatural. We're going to a place where it appears as though cracks in the fabric of reality allow otherworldly beings into our world. This episode is about the real experiences that my friends and I shared when we worked at a movie theater back in the late 90s. We believed that the theater was haunted. Some of the names and places will be changed to protect the privacy of those involved. The events will be recalled as accurately as possible. These are our stories. The Haunted Movie Theater, a true ghost story. As the 20th century was drawing to a close, strange paranormal events showed no signs that they would cease on account of the rapid advances of science and technology. Ghost stories appear to have been with us since the dawn of man. Perhaps tales of ghostly apparitions and spooky spirits will remain with us for as long as we walk this amazing space rock that we call Earth. Do you think that spirits only haunt ancient castles and old homes? Do you feel safe from ghostly hauntings when you're in busy public establishments such as libraries, restaurants, and movie theaters? If so, then this particular true story may make you reconsider. Around 1997, I worked at a Cineplex in the Galleria Mall. Along with my friends and many of my co-workers, I believed that the movie theater was haunted. In the late 90s, it was common for the supervisors in the theater to work multiple roles, including supervising the concession stand, the box office, operating the projection booth, and the floor crew, which cleaned theaters. Jared Batsy Batsvelka, a supervisor, was working as the projectionist one day. His friends called him Batsy on account of his last name, not because he was batty in any way. Working in the projection booth was a very different experience than working the other jobs at the theater. Whereas all of the other positions required working in the very hectic conditions created by the sea of customers that swept through the theater in tsunami-like waves. Working in the projection booth was like working in an island of calm. However, all was not always as it seemed. Alone in the projection booth with the door locked, Jared felt as though someone was about to walk by him. Instinctively, even knowing that there was no one up in the booth with him, he looked to see who was about to pass by him. Just a few feet away from him, he saw the faint image of a man. The man appeared as though he was half in this material world and half in another world. It was something like the image of a grainy, low-definition video that is lacking all of the pixels to create the clear, full image. This low-pixel man appeared to be dressed as a construction worker. After only a few seconds, the ethereal figure vanished. It was as though the pixels on the fabric of our visible reality had simply been deleted. Batsy had similar experiences on a number of occasions. He'd seen the ghostly figure of the construction worker in the projection booth, as well as near the popcorn popping room, which was just outside of the booth. Batsy never felt an evil or negative vibe from this ghost. For this reason, he never feared him. In fact, he would occasionally say, "Hello," and ask this ghostly man how he was doing, but he never received a reply. Carlos, another supervisor, also told the story of his ghostly encounters in the theater. On one occasion, Carlos was working as the projectionist. Alone in the booth, a man yelled and complained to him about the sound being too loud in Theater 5. After complaining, the man, dressed like a construction worker, walked out and disappeared. Carlos saw that the door had been locked, and when he ran down the hallway and then down the stairs, he only found a second locked door. He had been alone, yet he had just interacted with someone that shouldn't or couldn't have been there. On several other occasions while performing theater and aisle checks, Carlos had seen the same man sitting by himself in Theater Room 5, or sometimes in Theater 6. Theaters 5 and 6 were the last theaters on the first floor, near the emergency exits. On those occasions, the man dressed as a construction worker would suddenly disappear. While the apparitions of the ghost weren't witnessed by all of the theater staff, there was an experience that was far more common. I, along with a number of my coworkers, noted that theater rooms 5 and 6 were unusually cold in comparison to the other theater rooms. When popular movies brought in masses of people in sold-out shows, it was standard for those theaters to be very warm. The body heat generated by the large audience routinely raised the room temperature to less than comfortable levels. Theaters 5 and 6 were the exception to this rule. They were often unexplainably cold. Several of my friends also had a vibe or a feeling that they weren't alone when they went into Theaters 5 and 6 by themselves, or when they were alone in the back of the projection booth. Theaters 5 and 6 would trigger my fight or flight senses whenever I had to clean them by myself on slow weekdays. Being alone in those theaters put all of my senses on high alert, and my heart would subsequently beat just a little bit faster. The cold, dark, and dirty empty theaters, coupled with the stories of the ghost that haunted them, cultivated a touch of dread. Despite my hesitation of being alone in those theaters, I had to go in them, because it was my duty to clean them out before the audience came in for the next showtime. The atmosphere when cleaning those theaters by myself was just as chilling as when I was alone in the projection booth. In fact, the atmosphere in the projection booth and near Theaters 5 and 6 reminded me of the atmosphere of my dad's old haunted farmhouse. Both places had a heavy and unnatural feeling, but I have to add that the old farmhouse was in a league of its own, as its atmosphere was far heavier, much more sinister, and filled with dread. Unnatural, chilly, and thick are the words that best describe the sense of the atmosphere in and near Theaters 5 and 6. While I personally never saw the apparition of the ghost of the Galleria movie theater, I did come to believe that it was haunted. My belief that it was haunted by a ghost was largely based on the stories that my friends and co-workers shared with each other, and on the presence that I felt there. When I worked as one of the supervisors at the theater, I did everything that I could to avoid working as the projectionist in the original projection booth. While I didn't get the sense that the ghost was evil or some kind of malevolent entity, I was very uncomfortable when I was alone in the projection booth. Can you blame me? Just because I didn't think that the ghost was sinister and looking to harm me didn't mean that my impression was correct. If the place was haunted by a being that I couldn't see, then how could I know when it was around or what it was doing? Without being able to know with certainty who or what it was, how could I know that it wasn't like the evil spirits that haunted my dad's old farmhouse? The staff of the movie theater frequently talked about the apparent haunting. We theorized that the ghost of a construction worker haunted our home away from home at the theater. It wasn't much of a leap to arrive at that conclusion. After all, the local newspaper had reported that a construction worker died in a tragic accident while the Galleria shopping mall was being constructed in the early 1990s. The sightings of the ghostly apparition dressed in the attire of a construction worker near Theaters 5 and 6 seemed to neatly mesh with the record of a construction worker falling to his untimely death at that very spot. Perhaps the scariest of all the haunted movie theater stories is this final one. Jeremy was working as the projectionist in the projection booth. Jeremy was a big muscular guy. He was known to be tough, and his punch hit like a mule kick. His random punches to the arms and bodies of male employees were notorious. When he hit you, it hurt. Sometimes the film would snap while a movie was running, and the projectionist would have to make the necessary repairs as quickly as possible. This in and of itself was a normal occurrence for any projectionist in any theater. What wasn't normal or ordinary is what followed next. As Jeremy put the repaired film back in place on the projector, he felt a sudden cold chill accompanied by the feeling of an unseen presence. He was alone in the projection booth, and the door was locked. The movie film that broke was the movie reel that was playing in Theater 6. A firm finger poked Jeremy's shoulder hard. His blood ran cold. He whipped his head around and he saw nothing. Absolutely nothing. There was no one else there. He was alone. After that haunting experience with the theater ghost, Jeremy refused to be the projectionist in the upper booth. He'd only run projection in the lower booth, in the newer theaters on the basement floor. The lower theaters were completely separated from the haunted booth in the original 9 theaters on the ground level floor. I recently spoke with a few of my old friends and former co-workers, including my manager from my days working at the movie theater. They told me that they still believe that it really was, and probably still is, haunted. So, next time that you are at the movies, take a look around you and see who's sitting next to you. Does anyone around you look like they are a few pixels short of a full high-definition image? Does the man or lady sitting behind you appear to be fading from reality? The theater might be hosting both the living and the dead. It could be a ghost that's sitting with you. I hope that you enjoyed your stay here at the haunted Half Moon Inn. The Master requests that you consider supporting me and the inn by becoming a a patron of mine on Patreon. The Half Moon Inn needs your support to keep the doors open. You wouldn't want the residents here to feel forgotten and abandoned, would you? Creating quality scary stories to share with you is very important to me. Running this inn of horror is a passion of mine, and I would truly appreciate your support. The world is hurting. It needs more horror. Help me to heal the world through horror. Together, with your help, we could haunt this world one home at a time. Until next time, always remember, just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they aren't there.